Thank you for joining us. This webinar is going to look at the process of obtaining a retail authorization, which allows a business to sell electricity in those states that have adopted the National Energy Customer Framework, which is Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, ACT and Tasmania. This will be a 30-minute webinar. We are going to look at the existing energy market, opportunities for differentiation, and the actual process of becoming an authorised retailer. This webinar is recorded and will be available on demand. And if you have any questions, send me an email, connor@compliancequarter.com.au. So the energy industry is significant in terms of the economy. Revenue is around about $44 billion, contributed $1 billion to wages, and generally the energy market is characterized by a concentration of market share within the big three, which is EA, AGL and Origin, and 69% of residential consumers are supplied by those three. That's down from the previous year when it was 72%. 27% of electricity consumers are on the standing offer. And the standing offer is the default price that you would pay if you haven't negotiated a market contract. And it is a typically higher amount, and it is typically the price by which retailers reference their discount rate. So the Australian energy market is currently characterised by a concentration of customers serviced by the big three, which is decreasing, as I've said, increased regulation and disruption via distributed generation and storage. Customer dissatisfaction is a major theme in the energy market. During the 2017-2018 financial year, EA lost 4.2% of its residential customer base. And generally, customer dissatisfaction is at an all-time high across the energy market. 2.07 million customers are estimated to look to switch over the next 12 months. And that's based on a Roy Morgan survey. And we're also seeing increased compliance. This year we saw a raft of new regulation, including the DMO, default market offer, new life support and hardship rules, and the proposed regulation of embedded networks by the AEMC, which I'm going to discuss further. So within that mix, there's certainly opportunities to develop a energy retail business that is different. Lots of processes within the market are manual, including customer sign-up, comparison between retailers' offers, and various other components. There is the opportunity to respond to what's called market disruption, which includes virtual power plants, VPPs, distributed generation, energy storage, solar, and so on. There's also the opportunity to be a more customer-focused retailer. And looking at the level of dissatisfaction, that should obviously be a priority for all retailers. Lastly, there's the opportunity to offer a competitive product that rewards customers for saving energy and for reducing energy during peak demand when energy is the most expensive. So looking at the approval process, we characterize it in two separate fields. There is the main application, which, as I mentioned, in NECF, or the National Energy Customer Framework jurisdictions, involves an application to the Australian Energy Regulator, the AER. And in that application, you need to address each of their criteria. And that's focused around showing that you have a plan for a business, that you have the resources and capacity to execute that plan. And that necessarily involves having staff, experienced staff or contractors that you can bring in, a comprehensive compliance program that looks at the various obligations of an energy retailer, a suite of policies and procedures, a business plan, and a financial plan. To finance the business, the AER would expect you to have access to capital so that your business can continue up until the point that it is cash flow positive or it's a profitable business. That's the AER's application. I'm going to look at some of the issues that applicants face in a future slide. In addition to that, if you are an on-market retailer, you would need to obtain an AustraClear account. AustraClear is the market settlements system, and it's managed through the ASX. It's a NASDAQ system. You need to become a member of the Ombudsman schemes if you are selling energy to small customers in each jurisdiction, and you need to become a market participant with AEMO, which is the Australian Energy Market Operator, and that gives you access to systems where you actually transfer customers and carry out various other market transactions. So I spoke about embedded networks, and some of the people viewing this webinar may operate in the embedded network space. And at this point in time, in April 2019, there are proposed changes to the regulation of embedded networks, and the headline item is that they are proposing to get rid of exemptions, which means that you, in order to sell electricity within an embedded network, would need an off-market retail authorization. So if you look at each of those boxes and try and determine which would or wouldn't apply to an off-market retailer, it's pretty clear that the obligations about compliance, having staff and systems in place, would continue to apply, and so would the business plan requirements. But what wouldn't apply is some of the market settlement system need, so specifically access to AustraClear. You may still need to become a market participant depending upon how they work out how off-market retailers are going to have access to MSATs, which is the system that you use to see which customer is yours or to transfer customers. And you can expect that the prudential requirements will be less onerous for an off-market retailer because they do not have exposure to the wholesale market. So what are the common components and common issues that we see? Firstly, you need to focus on the business plan that you're developing. You need to work out the number of customers that you're proposing to take on, which is based on your point-in-time assessment, but looking at forecast. You need to explain what your unique selling position is and compare that to other offers that are available in the market, so that involves competitor analysis. You need to explain how you will staff the business, what risk management tools and methodologies you'll have in place, how you will finance the business, and then that ties into your expected costs over 1 year and your 3 to 5 year forecast. Energy is a particularly risky business in a number of senses because it, unless you are an off-market retailer, involves exposure to the wholesale market. So you need to explain how you will manage wholesale, financial, operational, and regulatory risk, what internal resources you'll have access to, whether you've got controls, whether they'll be effective, and how you'll fund your business. You need to have a comprehensive compliance program in place, and you'll need to explain how you'll resource it. It needs to be more than just a whole bunch of policies and procedures. The AER would want to see that you're actually able to operate a compliant business. And for each of those three main categories, you need to document all of that in a cohesive way that shows a consistent business and a comprehensive compliance program. The image to the right shows the typical size of 1/3 of the application that you would end up submitting. So one of the options there, of course, is to engage compliance quarter. and we can manage the application process for you. We've been involved in the majority of energy retail authorization applications, and we're an advisor to embedded network companies and retailers. One of the tools that we offer is the Compliance Hub, which you can see on the left, and that's our means of showing a system of compliance as opposed to a bunch of documentation. The Compliance Hub includes updates that we publish on a regular basis so you know what's happening. It lists all of the tasks that we've completed or that you've completed. It lists all of the risks of running a retailer, all of the guideline documents and policies and procedures, and includes online training. So if you were to be audited, for example, as opposed to running around and finding documentation you probably haven't looked at for far too long, you would simply give the auditor a login to the Compliance Hub, and they would be able to see your compliance program in action. So if you've got any questions about the process of obtaining a retail authorization, or if you would like to obtain a proposal from us or discuss the process, please give me a call or send me an email, and I'd be happy to help. And thanks very much for joining us today.